Hi everybody, this is Chaya Parkoff, LCSW, and I am going to share with you today the first installment of hopefully what will be a weekly video on some thoughts and insights on the weekly Torah portion, on the weekly Parsha, that lend themselves to mental well-being. Mental health prescriptions from the weekly Torah portion, which is going in a book called Parsha RX, Mental Health Prescriptions from the weekly Torah portion, and that I'm working on with a friend and colleague of mine. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit about this week's Parsha and some thoughts on it, and actually a very personal story. So it might be a little bit longer than usual, but it's a pretty profound experience that I had that relates directly to this week. So this week's Torah portion is Lech Lecha. It is the portion where Abraham is told by God to go forth. He has to leave his birthplace and he has to go to this land that God's going to show him. And what we learn from Abraham's trials and tribulations and tests is he is developing himself. He really becomes the patriarch of what will become the Jewish people. But then comes along this man named Abraham, who looks at the world, and he was a brilliant man. He was a scientist. He knew the workings of the world, and he looks in the world, and he looks and he says, there's got to be a creator, right? He looks at the creation and says, there's got to be a creator. This creation, something had to have created this. And so God says, okay, him and his wife Sarah, they're going to be the leaders of a people that will bring this message to the world, the message of unity, that people should not be oppressed, that there is something called tzedek and mishpat, that there is justice and truth, and that there's a world in which there is a creator, that there's enough for everyone, and Abraham and Sarah are going to lead this mission, which will ultimately become the Jewish people. So that's a little backstory. So here we are, and Abraham is now going to be taken, he has to go, leave his family, leave his birthplace. He has to be, we call him Avraham HaIvri. He was on the other side. Everybody was idol worshiping and sacrificing children, and these were the ways that people they worshipped idols. It was just times that this is what was accepted, and Abraham's like, that is not okay. And he stood on the other side. He really, even though everybody else was doing something, he stood for his what he knew deep in his, inside was the way things should be, that they shouldn't be that way. And so he was willing to be different. He was willing to stand up in the face of falsity and depravity. So here we are, Lech Lecha. So God says to him, Lech Lecha, which translated is mostly translated as go. Lech is like a command, go, and go forth. You go. Lech Lecha, go forth. That's how it's usually translated. But Lech, go, Lecha could also be translated as to yourself, Lecha. So it's Lech, go, Lecha, to yourself. Go to yourself. Really, Abraham's journey is within, to develop himself into his levels of spirituality and to develop himself as a human. And I believe, my friends, that this is the job of all of us. And this has been my journey. And I want to share with you a little, a profound thing that happened to me on my journey, and how really the answer was go to yourself. And that's where the answers are. So I had struggled as a young child. It was a lot of pressure to be thin, and I was a little chubby when I was little, and then I got into bulimia, binging and purging, and which it was horrible to live in that state. And I started to get into recovery when I was about 18 years old. So it's like almost 40 years ago? No, 30 years ago, 30 something years ago. I'm 57. So, yeah, a long time ago. So, shortly before I got into recovery, the summer before, it was a summer, I lived at the gym. If you wanted to see me, it was the summer of 1985. If you wanted to see me, you had to go to the gym. I went on a very, very, very strict diet, and I lived at the gym. And at the end of the summer, when I was going back to college, I was going to college in Oregon at the time, I was tan, and I was super skinny, and I was fit, and but I was dying inside, and I went back to college, and I tried desperately to stay in this, working out and not eating, and I was having the school nurse weigh me, and I was trying to get, food that would be on my, that would be okay for me to eat on my diet. I was trying to work out. I was putting working out before classes, and I started teaching aerobics so that I could work out, and I couldn't really maintain that. And I was also, just struggling emotionally with a lot of different things. And that year, I was binging and purging and really, really, really spiraling down. And I probably had been the heaviest that I'd ever been at the end of that year when I was graduating, that May or June. And I was probably the heaviest I'd ever been. And right after that, I started to get into 12-step recovery for the eating disorder and what have you. And so at first, it was about just not purging, right, keeping down whatever I put in my body, trust gravity and digestion, and I did that. And then I found a group, where the focus was really more on losing weight, not eating compulsively, and I lost 40 pounds, and I basically maintained a healthy body weight for many, many years, even between pregnancies and things like that. And about 4 years ago, and I basically ate the same way for all these years, and it's been fine, but I always still had this, I needed to be thin focus. And about 4 years ago, I had like a little health issue, and through a series of circumstances, I got led to kind of following a way of eating, how we have all these fads out there. And I started following this essentially like a cleanse, and it made such a difference in this health issue that I just continued to stay on it. And I lost a lot of weight. I was about 20 pounds lighter than I am now. And people were worried about me, but they didn't really tell me, except my dental assistant told me. She kept telling me, you're too thin, you're too thin, you're too thin. But to me, it triggered the dormant restrictor kind of need to be thin part of me. I had that under control for all these years, right? I worked a 12-step program. I was in a healthy body weight. I never had to worry about it. I knew this is what I followed. But this kind of triggered, and I kept saying, this is working for me. I'm doing fine. I'm healthy. I'm good. Okay, so 2 years go by, and 2 years ago, December, so it was December of 22, I went for my DEXA scan. I hadn't had a DEXA scan in a while. We have osteoporosis in my family, my mother, my aunt, and I was 55 at the time. And so I had my DEXA scan, and I had lost 10% bone mass in 2 years, which is worrisome. So I went from osteopenia to osteoporosis, and so I was like, I'm going to have to start eating more, and I'm going to have to gain weight. And I started seeing a nutritionist, and I freaked out inside, and I basically was like in a trauma response of terror, utter terror of gaining weight. Terror. Like tremendous terror. And, I was seeing a therapist, and I was just like, it was such old deep stuff. And I just was terrified. I was having a really hard time adding food back in, the foods that I wasn't eating, and eating a more wholesome, balanced diet. And then October 7th happened, and that, threw everything off. And then I went to Israel, and I was trying different ways. I was reaching out to people in a way to, to work this through the steps again, which I'm a firm believer in 12-step programs, 100% a way saved my life. But I was really struggling, and mainly struggling with this idea of gaining weight. Just terror. And it was just, I can't even explain it more than just saying it was terror. And it didn't make sense. Like, my brain up here, my frontal lobe understood, hey, you're fine. But my lower brain, here, if this is your brain, here's your amygdala, the fire, the smoke alarm, and here's the limbic system and the reptilian brain. This is the survival mechanism. I was really in a survival response. I was in, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me? It wasn't logical, right? It didn't make sense. My frontal lobe was not online when it came to this topic. So in March, I got trained in a modality that I love using in my therapy practice. I've seen incredible just growth in my clients and also in myself. So I took this training in brain spotting, and I was actually used as a demo in one of the days of training. And I said, I have this lifelong issue of being terrified, like I have to be thin, I have to be in a thin body, and terror of being anything other than that. And so that began a journey of working through from a brain wiring, the neural networks around this topic in my brain, and starting to do the healing. And it was up and down. And then I did an expansion training, a higher level training, and I got picked as a demo again. And more healing, more movement on the journey. And I've been doing a lot of work, a lot of healing along the way. And then the holidays come. And I gave a class to the women on Yom Kippur. And the night at Kol Nidre of Yom Kippur, the rabbi of the shul that we go to, Eish Kodesh, here in Denver, Rabbi Karnofsky, spoke about Rav Dessler, and how Rav Dessler talks about doing teshuvah, doing our, working on ourselves and developing ourselves in community, letting people know what we're working on, what we're struggling with, so we can get support, we can get accountability. So, and that we are all connected. And when one person does teshuvah, when one person, overcomes a character flaw, let's say, it's as if everyone did it. And I felt like if I speak about this and bring this into community, and if I can heal from this, and maybe that would save someone else from the torture that I was feeling inside. So when I gave this class on the day of Yom Kippur, I shared with the women that came to the class what I have been struggling with. And it was very emotional, and I felt very exposed, but I was willing to do it. And I got a lot of support. Then I gave the class, and then I got a lot of support. Someone came up to me and they asked me for my Jewish name. They can pray for me, and then I went. The other rabbi of the shul, Rabbi Stern, he usually opens the ark for Ne'ilah, which is the very last set of prayers right before the fast ends. It's a time when everyone's been fasting for 24, 25 hours. The gates of heaven are open. Our prayers, it's just a very, very, very spiritual time. If you've ever experienced it, you'll understand what I mean. If you know. And if you don't know, I invite you to come to our shul next year and experience that. He says, I'm going to, keep in my prayers for the whole community, our whole shul and the whole community and all of, Klal Yisrael, all of the Jewish people and the world. But if you have anything specific that you want me to keep in mind, please come and tell me at the break. So during our break, which is very short, it's usually like only an hour because we just love all the singing and we just don't rush through the prayers. I went up to him and I said, listen, I have an issue that I'm not even going to go into what it is. All I could tell you is that I need a miracle. I cannot get out of this myself. Like, God, I don't know what else to do. I'm doing a lot of work. I'm doing healing and I've been moving in the right direction, but like, I can't get this thought out of my head. And there's a concept in Brachos, I believe it is, in the Talmud, that's like a person can't lift themselves up out of, the way I like to think of it is like quicksand. You can't get yourself out of quicksand. So I needed to be raised up from it. And I said, if you could just like, please pray, like God should just send me a miracle. So then during that prayer service, I was standing, I was at the kind of the front of the women's section, and I was standing next to my friend, and I had brought with me some pictures of myself just to like connect with all the younger, all the parts of me, all the ages of me. And I happened to bring a picture. So I had pictures of when I was 4 and when I was 6 and throughout my teens and everything. And then I had this picture of me right before I got into recovery at that graduation when I was the heaviest I'd ever been in my life. And so I brought those pictures. I looked through them maybe earlier in the day, but I hadn't really done much looking at them, but they were there with me. And I'm praying and I'm doing the prayers that we're doing and we're singing and I'm just like, God, please help me. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, like we say in Yiddish, an Einfall. An Einfall is an idea. It fell in. It literally fell in, which is really how God communicates with us through our thoughts. This thought, I don't even remember the thought coming in. I just remember my response, which is I started to cry and say to myself, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm like getting emotional even talking about it now. I said, I've hated you. I have hated you. I have hated you all these years. And, but that girl was hurting and she was surviving. She was trying to survive. And she did. And she got me to recovery. And I just said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm a changed person. I had to Lech Lecha. I had to come to myself. You can't hate your way into a version that you love. We can't hate ourselves into loving ourselves. I realize this, And so I really identified with Lech Lecha. And so often when I'm in therapy, counseling, when I have clients, in fact, I just had a new client this week, and she was saying how she was struggling with a habit, with like kind of an addiction, and she's like, I know I'm just trying to run away from myself. I'm running away from myself. I keep wanting to run away from myself. And I said, it's a survival mechanism. We're just trying to survive. We are wired to survive. And so we use often ways of coping that allow us to survive. Just the problem is we don't necessarily have to survive now. But we're using these things and then they end up turning on us, right? They initially help. We're using them to be the solution, but they end up hurting us. Like the food for me and the obsession with weight and the obsession with my body was a coping mechanism. But looking outside for the solution is looking in the wrong direction. We have to Lech Lecha. We have to look within and embrace within and embrace all of those parts and that's so much of the work that I do with my clients is integrating IFS into the brain spotting and all, embracing. So I wanted to share that story. I feel really vulnerable now. But hopefully it'll inspire someone else that, it's like Glinda the Good Witch. I actually have a little, where is it? Okay, somewhere on my desk I have a little sticky note that says Glinda, because I remind myself, she's always, everywhere, right? And what does she say? Just click your heels. There's no place like home. You're already there. Lech Lecha. The journey is within. Thank you so much. And you can put comments, and hopefully this will be the start. I know this was long, and if you stuck till the end, I really appreciate it. And hopefully next week we have Chaya Sarah, I believe. Lech Lecha Vayera. Vayera is next week, so I'll be back. Have a great week, a beautiful Shabbat, and I'll see you next time.